Welcome to the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and we have with us Santa Cruz Hit Squad's Tobin Ortenblad, the gravel and mountain bike and off-road racer with a cyclocross. I guess you still race cyclocross actually every year, it seems like.
I try to do a little bit every year. Yeah. Try to keep the UCI points current more than anything.
I was going to say cyclocross past, and that's where you may have come to know Tobin over the years, but now Tobin, you find him racing at the Lifetime Grand Prix, everything else. We'll have links down to Tobin's social profile, down to the Hit Squad's profile down below. Tobin, you're with us to answer some of the questions that people have submitted down in the YouTube comments for this podcast. You can do that now if you're watching on YouTube. Ask whatever training or cycling related question. Before we do any of that though, and we're going to cover things like sprinters or those with those sort of tendencies becoming more endurance focused athletes. We're also going to go over tactics and how they're different in gravel races than road races and how people are maybe misunderstanding that whole situation. Lots of great stuff. But first, we have rapid fire questions, Tobin.
Let's go.
All right. Socks over or socks under your bombers?
People aren't going to like this. I find it, I find it very situational, if I'm being honest. So I don't particularly like socks over leg warmers, but I do like socks over tights, but not thermal tights, just thin spandex tights. So let's split hairs and give it a kind of a non-answer. And if it's wool socks, wool always goes under, always under.
Yeah.
It's got to be like a nice, thin, tight, white sock with white shoes. Hot take.
Yep. Do you agree with my perspective that if the sock contrasts with the leg warmer or tight, it should be over? If it's the same color, it should be under?
I would agree with that because it's almost like sometimes your socks are, completely. Like if it's the same color, kind of like black on black, whatever, you don't even notice it. So what's the point? But yeah, sometimes I'm like, you got a pair of dingy white socks and your shoes make your socks look gray. Like that's bad. You know, if you only have one shade of white, it looks white until you have a very white, vibrant white, and then it looks really dirty. So.
I think the most important rule of all this, though, is that if you are riding with Keegan, then you go socks over.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Socks. If Keegan's are on socks, just go over. It's like all rules out the window.
Because he absolutely hates it, and it ruins his day. He gets like angry about it. It's just fantastic.
It's an easy way to get Keegan to do most of the polling so he doesn't have to look at you.
I love it. All right. Traditional VO2 max intervals of those 3 to 5 minute variety or 30-30s?
I like longer personally because I don't know. For me, I take like that longer. When you go into a race day or whatever you're training for, having that like confidence in that I was just banging out these 3 to 5s feels more like applicable and being like, okay, now we got this climb. You're like, I got this. This is an effort that I've done before. I've replicated this effort in training. I'm a big fan of replicating race efforts in training. That might be a little old school, but I like that.
This is interesting because I expected you to say 30-30s because of your past in cyclocross racing.
Yeah. I think in cross racing, I probably would have said just punch, punch, punch. Like the acceleration is more important as if you're exiting a corner. But for what I'm doing now, I would say those longer efforts, because if you look at them both, they're both, like what I said, they both are situational to the type of racing you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely does. Yeah. Breakaway or sprint finish?
Ooh.
You do race a good amount of like road stuff in our region here, Northern California or Northern Nevada.
Yeah, I do race a lot of road. Man, I always like a breakaway personally because, I don't race with teams. So I'm going with, I don't have a team. I race alone. So I like a break. I like to get rid of as many people as possible. But I don't mind a sprint either. Like a reduced sprint would be ideal to give a complete non-answer.
Going back to gravel-ish sort of stuff, gravel, mountain bike, whatever else, what's the best course that you look forward to every year that you race and the worst course that you do not look forward to every year?
For both mountain and gravel, or just pick one?
Yeah, pick one. What's the one that stands out as the one that you like the most? And then what's the one that's the least? Could be from the Lifetime Grand Prix, could be from anything.
My favorite gravel is Lost and Found in the Sierra. It's not a lifetime, not a lifetime series event or anything, but it's 100-mile course, pretty rugged, has some hard descending. It's got some hard. It's just a cool race. It's beautiful is the main thing. So that's going to be my favorite, and it's an old one. I've done it for a long time. Least favorite race. Oh, there's so many. I don't know, dude. Probably Leadville. Like, I just hate the altitude, but I always end up having a good time there. But I guess with Leadville, I'm like, geez, if this race wasn't at 10,000 feet, it would just literally, people would be like, oh, the out and back race. But you put it at 10,000 feet, and all of a sudden the out and back race becomes this whole thing. Yeah. But it's iconic. But yeah, I don't know. It's an out and back with not much single track at all, and you're at 10,000 feet just to really make you feel terrible the whole time you're doing the out and back.
Tobin does not like altitude.
I'll be there though this year likely, so
That's right.
Joke's on me.
If you had to pick, you could only have one: flight attendant or a dropper post on your Santa Cruz Blur.
Ooh. I would probably choose a dropper post. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I don't know. You get that seat out of the way, and you can make any bike really good and agile at almost anything.
Yeah.
Versus,
I would go flight attendant.
You would.
There's no. Oh yeah, yeah. Because I feel like when my bike, flight attendant makes my bike better everywhere on the course, whereas a dropper is just going to make it slightly better in a certain portion of the course. And for me personally, it's usually not a deal breaker to have a high saddle. I can manage without it.
Yeah.
Without a dropper. And I can also manage without flight attendant, but man, it's like, it blows my mind every time I ride with it. I'm just like, riding is so much better now because of this.
That's a very good answer, actually. I mean, a way to take a step back and look at the bigger picture instead of just that one. That's a good answer. Yeah.
Are you on team flight attendant now?
It makes me reconsider my answer. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I like it. Over-unders or hard starts for your threshold intervals? Which do you prefer?
Over-unders or, sorry, say it again?
Hard starts. Like the ones where you'll start off with 15 to 30 seconds.
And then settle in.
Maybe even up to a minute, really hard, and then you settle in.
I would prefer that, like a hard start, because it, again, feels like something that I'm going to encounter out there, as if like following an attack and then settling into after the attack. And yeah, personally, it's something I feel like I can be better at. So I actually should be doing more of those, I think.
They're really good. Yeah, solid ones. Ramp test or 20-minute test? Which do you prefer?
20-minute test, I think, is the test of truth. I think you need it's such a well-rounded thing. I mean, the 8 minutes, great. Like, maybe you don't have a 20-minute area where you can do it. There's a time and a place for the 8s, but I think part of a 20-minute test is understanding how to do a 20-minute test and knowing how hard to go and how to pace it. I mean, doing a good 20-minute test means you're kind of really understanding how you feel out there. And I'm a big fan of that. And the first ones you do, you're gonna kind of probably blow it. You're gonna see like this good steady, and this drop off. But when which is even, I mean, everyone's gonna have that, right? Because you're going for the biggest number possible. But you'll see the more you do and the better you get, just it's like steady. And almost like, I almost feel like if you are really good, it's like really steady. And then you get a drop off at like 16, 17 minutes. And then you're just like dumping at the end. Like, you got 1 minute left and it's just absolutely emptying.
It should be a
yourself.
subtle smile. If there was any shape to it, it should be a very subtle smile.
Yeah, I think ideally it's like hard, yeah, I think that's bang on. Like hard, settle in, maybe die a little bit and finish strong.
Yeah. You don't want to like be a hero and get a freshman kick at the end and sprint.
No.
If you did that, you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
But it's just like a subtle lift of a few watts or something toward the end. And when you look at the average,
about a minute, I feel like ideally, right? 19 minutes, you're just like, how much do we have here? Like, let's just like be dead in a minute from now.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny when we look at the data for all the reasons you just said, 20-minute tests are one of the worst ones for giving an accurate FTP for an athlete. And the way that we look at that is we look at subsequent workouts that are critical indicators of like ability to show threshold.
Yeah.
And since we have all this data, machine learning and AI, we can analyze this stuff. And 20-minute test is the worst at giving athletes a well-calibrated FTP to their abilities.
Interesting.
8-minute test is also worse, but in different ways.
Yeah.
than the 20-minute test. The ramp test is more precise, at least with the TrainerRoad ramp test. There's a lot of different ramp protocols out there.
Huh.
But which is interesting because I think the brand for ramp testing is that it gives you an inflated FTP because we're going higher in intensity.
Yeah.
But I think everybody listening to this, if you don't use TrainerRoad, you absolutely should. It's worth it just for this feature alone. AI FTP detection beats all of them substantially by like in terms of workout outcomes. You never even have to do a testing effort. It just looks at everything you do. And you could be doing an endurance block and it knows you, your abilities, your past, and it uses AI to figure out what your FTP is with greater accuracy. It's pretty darn sweet.
That's super interesting. And there's no reason that shouldn't work because
right.
Every zone you have and you do is all based on an FTP of whatever it is. So any of these endurance efforts, like if you're doing these with ease, blah, 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 you should be able to calculate your FTP off of that. And that sounds like that's what the AI is doing, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like an athlete like you, Tobin, I bet you know when your FTP has gone up or down, and I can tell you, guess it pretty darn closely.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of athletes, the vast majority of athletes don't have that well-trained ability that you have from years upon years of doing structured training.
Yeah.
Like you're able to figure it out. And I think that that's where like AI makes up for that. And even for an athlete like me that feels like I have a really good fix on it, my ego still gets in the way sometimes. And I'm like, no, it's got to be higher than that. But then I go with it and I'm like, actually, it's great. And I'm really enjoying my workouts here because I'm not just being destroyed every day. Like your training shouldn't just destroy you every day.
I mean, it's better for your ego to have workouts that you're really just crushing constantly, right? Rather than putting up like a 10 or 15, 20 watt inflated FTP or test number, getting your FTP and then having it just be excruciating every time out. Like that's a path for destruction.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes you hate your bike,
Yeah, exactly.
Hoods on the gravel bike, rotated inward or vertical?
So just like square or in, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm an old dog learning some new tricks out here, and I've started tilting mine in a bit, and it does feel nice because you hold your hands out, and it's like this is less comfortable. This is a little more neutral. So I'm not like crazy angled, but I got a bit of a lean to them now, and some more modern bars kind of encourage. The angle of the hood is straight with the drop and the angle of just the way the bar tilts. So it's kind of all very seamless now to do that. But it took me a while to kind of adopt that. And because, you see all this disgusting stuff of just like these hoods that are literally like almost touching. And then, you don't have to be that guy. But yeah, now I get on a bike that's like square and I'm just like, oh, my wrists, it all feels bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, right? I got to match the drops. Mid-ride gas station stop, what are you grabbing?
Ooh, probably a Payday and a Red Bull.
Ooh, what a good combo.
Yeah.
Sweet and salty.
Yeah.
I like it.
Hard to beat.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned that you dislike Leadville earlier.
Yeah.
I assume you dislike Unbound maybe for different reasons. I feel like Unbound was probably weighed close.
It was.
So which one would you rather do Unbound than Leadville then?
Oh, man, that's a really good question, Jonathan. I don't know. Maybe I'd rather do Leadville than Unbound. I mean, here's the thing. I don't hate either of those races. Every time I go to the race and I finish the race, I feel good. And I'm excited about it. I feel good about what I did out there, because finishing those races alone is an accomplishment. So never discount that. The minute I cross the finish line, it's always a good feeling. But I'm going more on like, I have this moment every race where it's like, I'm alone and just shelled and I wonder, what am I doing? All the time. It happens almost every race. And that moment is worse at Unbound because you might have 90 miles left of racing versus it.
Oh my gosh.
And that's how it is, versus at Leadville, that moment comes and you only have 30 miles left or 20 or whatever it is. Because it's like, I'm good enough to make a selection, be there, living on a prayer, as I say, and then blowing out just no man's land. And that's when, your self-reflection comes in. And then you get caught by a chase group, then you jump in there and it takes you a while to settle in and get the engine going again. And then generally you can win that group because you were fitter than some of those guys were to even make that initial selection, but then you overstepped and then you're dying and then they catch you and then you settle in and then you end up, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, gravel racing is or this newfound off-road racing is a different beast. What has gone well in your season? We're out of the rapid fire.
Yeah.
None of that was really rapid, but just the same, I feel like we had a great time. What's gone well and what hasn't gone well for your season so far? How do you analyze it? And then also within that, do you take the approach of like, well, I stick to my plan for the rest of the year? Are you the sort of athlete that after every race, when something goes great, you're like, I'm going to do more of that, or something goes poor, I'm like, and you're constantly iterating on it? How do you approach it?
I'd say my coach and I are pretty dynamic, constantly changing. I almost feel like I don't coach myself by any means. My coach still coaches me, but he and I work very closely together to be like, hey Dave, like this worked well, or let's look at Leadville last year. Like that exact block, really, I was feeling phenomenal. So I'm like, why don't we just take that block and let's change maybe some of the volume we did last year for Unbound, but let's take that Leadville block of that intensity and let's put that in the Unbound with a few tweaks here and there, and a bit more volume. But yeah, constantly trial and error. We have a general idea of what needs to be accomplished and what work needs to be done. And then managing fatigue. Like I did some big rides earlier in the week and, I was just like, dude, I'm just blocked. My legs feel heavy. And it's not in the plan to take 2 rest days, but I'm like, we need to do it because we can't get back to doing good work without rest. And that's I almost feel like that's the biggest thing with amateurs. Or anyone is just rest is always good, but having enough self-honesty to know when you actually just want to do the work and when you don't do the work and when you need rest and don't need rest. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. And then I guess things that have gone well and not gone well is we've done more intensity earlier in the year. That has been good.
Nice.
And then I'm trying to think. I mean, I'd say like things have I'd say a few races haven't gone well, like BWR Arizona and Whiskey didn't go well. I don't particularly know why, or maybe I think I had higher expectations going to them. Leadville, or Whiskey, I think I was probably just tired from Sea Otter and Levi's Fondo and everything. But yeah, just taking it as it comes and always being flexible. And knowing when to just take a breather,
You at Levi's, I heard, because I didn't see this part on the coverage, but like you along with, oh gosh, another rider, Tyler Williams, maybe?
Yes.
You guys played a big role in bringing back a dangerous break, and it kind of meant your whole race, right? Like you went all in fairly early on in that race to be able to bring it back, and just you blew up to the nth degree.
Yeah, it had to be done. But yeah, there's probably 3 big climbs on that race that are notable. And yeah, so in between the first and second climb, I was in the break early. We went up the first climb in the break, Vakoch and Stetna, and there's some strong guys there. So I got dropped out of that on the climb, caught by the selection of what was left of the main field, and now they need to catch the break. So then Tyler Williams and I were both dropped out of the break on the first climb. But then it was almost perfect because he and I might have got dropped out of the field if we hadn't got a head start on the climb, being first climb.
Like you kind of like sag climbed it from a macro perspective.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And then he and I were able to exactly ride. We didn't ride the break back per se, but we took some big time back on the break just through this like valley, just trading poles in the flat. And then going into the second climb was just like, that was my finish line. So I was like, just everything you got to just be dead there and send them on their way, But it's tricky because, there's so many strong guys left in the field at that point where I don't necessarily toot my own horn too much on like oh, I brought the brake back. Like, yes, we did help. And at that point in the field, everyone's going to look at Keegan and Matt Beers. So it's going to be super negative and slow and stupid and frustrating. So you know how it just gets, right? Everyone's looking. Then some guys attack, and then people follow the attack, and then it sits up and goes 5 miles an hour. Meanwhile, you're hemorrhaging time. So I don't know. Yes, the Keegan and Matt probably would have eventually just done their damage on the climb and probably caught the break either way. But keeping the pace going is pretty important too, just from a frustration and stress standpoint. So, yeah. So that was my finish line, and I was dead after that.
They don't feel the same way as you. They don't feel that they would have brought that group back without you. You and Tyler up there.
That feels
just putting in
that feels good.
Hard work. Yeah.
Feels good to be valued.
What sort of power are you putting out when you're emptying the tank like that, Tobin? Like, I don't know if you remember what the pulls were like, or sort of average or normalized.
We're pulling between like 380 and 430.
Oh, geez.
And
this goes on for a while, eh?
Probably
this isn't just like
40 minutes or so.
Oh my gosh.
Or maybe a bit. I'd have to really look, but a decent while. Because you got to think about like your effort, and you got to think about like, okay, if I was in the break, I probably wouldn't be pulling at threshold or over threshold. I'd be pulling at like sweet spot. So if you want any chance of taking time back on the break, you have to be working harder than the break, which is really, it's a huge ask, right? Like when you see the time gap, it's coming down slow, and you're working exponentially harder, and the time is not coming down exponentially. It's very like slow and linear, like 1 second, 2 second, 3. So yeah, you have to be riding all out, or you're just not going to take any time back.
This is a really good point, Tobin. And this actually meshes really well with the next question. So I'm just going to read Kyle's question.
Yeah. And
then we'll kind of go through and vibe on tactics. So stay tuned for road, gravel, whatever else, group tactics coming up. Lots of discussion on this. Kyle says, I have a question for whichever Lifetime Grand Prix racer you have on the podcast next. I'm a Cat 2 road racer from the Southeast and just started racing gravel last year. I found it super frustrating as it seemed like no breakaways ever had a chance. And since the whole field seemed to be on the same page, even athletes of much lower fitness levels were able to stay in the large main group, making for sketchy and inefficient riding. Toward the end of the race, the pace picked up a lot, and plenty of those lower level riders were being dropped. But since so many of them just got a free ride in a huge group, they were basically fresh and able to finish way above what their fitness or tactics would typically earn them. I had one top 5 age group finish this last year, but the rest of my results were mid-pack. I consider myself a good road racer, with well-trained tactical skills, so this has been really frustrating. Is it like this in the Lifetime Grand Prix? My hunch is those races are more like a road race, and I'd enjoy those much more. So I think that, and this is me judging Kyle. So, and I don't have all the information, so please give me some grace here, but what this sounds like, I'm going to repeat this question back to you in very simple words from a different perspective. What it sounds like you're saying is the race didn't unfold how I wanted it to unfold. Can I find races that unfold the way I want them to unfold?
Sure. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Do you notice this though, Tobin? That like in gravel, it's different than road or anything else like this?
Yeah. Yes and no. So I think that gravel is road racing and gravel are very different. They're so different. They can't be any more different, because if you think of a road race, especially a big professional road race, and when I race road at home, I'm like, why can't a breakaway just go? Why can't this race? I get frustrated like Kyle. I'm like, why can't it go the way I want it to go? Why can't a breakaway, you know what I mean? Like, why can't like we see on TV, why can't this race be predictable? And I'm like, well, why would it be predictable? It's a bike race. No one wants a predictable race. That plays into the hands of, the teams, right? So all these races are they're not predictable. And gravel racing, especially over road racing, it's more like mountain bike racing in the sense that there isn't, when are you coasting, when are you really not doing anything? Like gravel is all out all day. And in the view of everyone doing it, if you're not there isn't a breakaway. All there is a selection. Like, and if you're not in that selection, you're really not in the running to make the race, almost, if that makes sense. So, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't make the break or the selection, your day's over. And there are little selections here and there, like you'll see at Unbound, but you notice like these guys, these non-danger riders go 1s, 2s, 3s, whatever. And now, you've got a group of 4 or 5, but they're not the big name riders. The second the big name rider goes, Matt Beers goes, or Keegan goes, everyone reacts. So that's how lifetime goes. And I don't know, it's just
that sounds almost similar to what he's talking about. You bring up a good point in the sense that it's hard to get as free of a ride.
It's hard to get as free of a ride.
It's free 99. It's not free.
Yeah.
like when you're racing gravel, because you have to be pedaling and working just to be able to maintain your position in the group more than you would in road.
Yeah.
It's almost like road on a climb.
Yeah.
Rather than road on like a flat, just because of the draggy surface and line choice and the complication.
Yeah.
You brought up I've never thought of it this way, that it's less about breakaways and it's more just about surviving the next selective wave.
It's just like, surviving all day. Yeah.
It's like the group is going to be a big mass. And then when speed goes up, you're going to lose a bit. And when the speed goes up again, you're going to lose a bit more. And it just whittles and chops away.
Yeah.
Until you're in the group that you're in.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for Kyle, I guess one thing I would say is just, you are one man and you just have to be patient. And I've been really bad at that, racing road at home, because I get in these races and I feel like I'm the strongest one here. I should win every race. But you're racing so many other teams. There might be 3 teams with 8 people each. And so the best thing you can do is just how it is. Try not to get frustrated and just be patient. And if everyone else is getting a free ride, even if you think they're below your ability, take the free ride. Don't work, just if there's that many people, make sure you're being patient and conserving as much as they are too. So when that time comes and the pace goes up, you can be making 1 or 2 selections while those guys hopefully aren't. And that's just kind of how it goes. It's just a game of huge engines and horsepower, and it's just hard.
Yeah. I think oftentimes the right tactical decisions are at odds with ego.
Yeah.
Like, it's really hard to be racing with your ego forward, making the decisions for you, in other words, and also make the right tactical decisions. And what I pick up on this, Kyle, this is me putting you on a leather couch. I don't know you, Kyle. Just judgment-free zone. Allow me to guess here. But I assume that it probably hurts your ego to be in this group where you're like, from what it sounds like, a legit cat too, that like really knows how to work a group in a road race. And suddenly you have guys that are not even remotely close to that level of experience, and they're in the group with you. And that's probably frustrating to your ego. You're like, I should be ahead of these people. Why are you still here? Get back there. Like, don't get in front of me. If you remove the ego from it, and instead you're just making the right tactical decisions, all of those riders are incredible assets. And sorry, this is also pretty like sociopathic over here, maybe psychopathic, but like all those riders are great assets.
Yeah.
They are probably going to work really hard when is not the right time to work hard. They are probably going to put themselves in spots where they're going to do your work for you.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that you can use that. And they might also surprise you and be faster and stronger than you in key moments. And instead of letting that hurt your ego, you just are constantly thinking about what is the right tactical decision to make with this makeup of the group and where I'm at within it.
Yeah.
I think that if you kind of take that approach that like you're almost just an algorithm in a race, and what you're doing is you're just taking in inputs and then you're finding the best outcome.
Yeah.
And that's like what you're doing. You're not approaching it with ego. I think that that's going to help out, because I've noticed this as well with like mountain bike and gravel races. I remember at one of the Epic Rides races once, we're going, and I think that I was doing somewhere like, I had like an NP of like 360. I was like dying, and it was after like 10 minutes in the race. And that at that point, 360 NP, that was like me doing a ramp test effort or something. Like, it was so hard. And a guy on a plus tire, the 27.5 plus fat, like not full fat bike, but in between, specialized hardtail on flat pedals.
Like a 2.6. Yeah.
Yeah, like was like dropping me up a climb, and my ego was so hurt, right? Because I'm this cool racer cross country dude, and I'm just getting hammered by these people. You know what ended up happening is, like, just a couple minutes later, all those people just full ripcord, right? And they blew out. And again, it was about like that whittling away of that group. But for the rest of the day, there were people up there that I didn't expect to see. And you know what? It was great for me to just sit back and humble myself and just be like, I need to work together with these people, and let's all work together and change the perspective. So I think that's like a big thing that probably hurts all of us, is when ego gets in the way of the right tactical decisions. They are at odds with each other almost all the time, unless your name is Tade.
All the
Maybe
time.
Tade can get away with it.
All the time. Yeah.
That's a good point. Even Tade, it's probably bit Tade too.
Yeah.
You know?
And if I had $1 for every time I raced stupid at home on the road, this is more on the road because my ego perceives me as the big dog when I'm racing road at home. And I constantly ask any of my friends, I'm pissed off after the race, blah, blah, blah. They're like, well, you rode pretty dumb. And I'm just like, yeah, but it should be this way. And it's just not. And I rode dumb, and I didn't temper and just be like, okay, I just need to wait for, you know what it is? It's just like, it's like you just wait for the race to come to you. Almost is it's dumb, but it's kind of just what.
And it's hard. It
really
takes a lot of patience and trust, huh?
Yeah, ton.
You mentioned Lifetime Grand Prix and the dynamic of just everybody. The big dogs are Keegan and Matt. On the women's side, it's going to be like a Sophia. And then depending on the different races, we have like Caroline, who's really strong at Unbound, or we have like Melissa, who's really strong at Leadville. It's always a pretty simple tactical framework for the group. Like, there's actually like one, whereas in a road race, there's a lot of different tactics at play. Like, each team or individual probably has some sort of end game and strategy that's going to be unique to another. Unless you're racing in NorCal, and then, when Mike's Bikes or some big team is there, then it's just like, oh geez, like they're the ones that you watch, and it starts to feel like the Lifetime Grand Prix. In road racing, when there's a lot of different potential outcomes, that makes it really dynamic, interesting, hard to control for the big teams, but very... as an athlete that's racing, it actually sometimes makes it easier for you to have your desired outcome, because there's so many different agendas and missions to accomplish that the field independently are trying to carry out, that it actually can make it sometimes a bit easier. Whereas when you have a race like the Lifetime Grand Prix, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but hold on with me. When you have the race like the Lifetime Grand Prix, there's kind of one tactical game, and that's Keegan and Matt Beers are going to be the ones that are probably going to finish 1 and 2. So because of that, everybody just marked Keegan and Matt Beers.
And that's
so from one respect, it's kind of hard to escape that, because it sucks for them. Yeah.
But you're not them. And that's the best tactic. It's in your best interest and their best interest to do that. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Then just keep going.
And at the same time, it kind of also, and this is the other side of the coin, like any good economist, I guess, would say, like, the other side of the coin is the fact that there's one strategy in the game theory that's going on here. There's just one. So as a result, you could build a strategy off of that to be able to like leverage it, and it's possibly going to be a bit more simple for you. So, it's all like, I think that if you're approaching this without ego again, and you're just approaching it from the tactical decisions, you'll be able to understand, Kyle, like what the group is doing and what they're responding to. And gravel, more often than not, it's not like a bunch of independent missions that are going on and people are trying to make a different tactics work. Instead, it's probably a more simplified tactical profile, and you just have to make sure that you're operating wisely within that framework, or you're leveraging that framework against them in some way. But you can't complain that that's the framework. It is what it is, and you can't change that. Instead, you can just change how you react to it, how you operate within it. And I think hopefully that makes racing a bit less frustrating for Kyle,
Yeah, I think that's very well put.
Let's go into this next one from Anonymous. They say, I started cycling in 2010, and this was submitted through a different avenue, obviously, than the, the YouTube questions. They say, I started cycling in 2010 in college, and as a wrestler, I found my strength in sprinting. I always struggled to hang in on the long rides and climbs, but found it pretty easy to win a sprint if I could get to the end. I took a break from cycling from 2016 until last year, and as much as I'd love to use my sprint, crits and group rides are a rarity, while gravel racing is everywhere here in my area of the Midwest. I'm not as lean and muscular as I once was, but I still carry a good amount of muscle, 180 pounds at 5 foot 8 inches. That's probably like that's like 75, 80 kilos, somewhere around there, I think. And anytime I start hitting the gym again, it takes me no more than a few weeks to put up some big weight again. 365 pound back squat, 400 pound deadlift, and 275 pound bench press. Holy cow.
It's a big dog. No wonder you're winning sprints.
Yeah. Hope your bike's okay when you're sprinting with that thing, you know? I'm really struggling to become good at longer endurance efforts. I used to be great at hard efforts and could repeat them all day, and I'm still better than most at it. But even though my coach has me doing 10 hours per week of zone 2 and 2 interval days each week, I still find it hard to maintain 75% of my FTP for more than a couple of hours from an average power point of view. But I can put up 110% of my FTP for an hour from a normalized power point of view. So I'm going to break that down really quick and explain it for people. So you can hold like 80% of your FTP. Like maybe the best example of this are triathletes that are doing like the half Ironman, full distance Ironman, that sort of stuff. Those athletes for a full distance Ironman can ride at like 85 to 90% of their FTP the whole time and then still run a fast marathon. And it's wild. And that's like 4 to 5 hours.
I'm getting my calculator.
For an average athlete. Sorry, say that again.
I'm getting my calculator to look at some numbers just to have some from reference here.
Cool. Yeah, it's probably a good mode for anybody listening to this. Pull out the calculator, run your FTP. If you're going to be holding 80% of your FTP, and I'll link to an article about this where we kind of talk about pacing and how you can kind of calculate this. You can hold 80% of your FTP for a pretty darn good amount of time. If you're going to be holding it, you mentioned that you find it hard to maintain it for a couple of hours. A lot of fit athletes, if they aren't used to that, still might find that hard to maintain consistently for 75%, but it's kind of expected that they'd be able to hold 80%, 85% of their FTP for a couple of hours. Then looking at it from, like you say, for an hour, you can do 110% of your FTP from a normalized power point of view. That sounds like what they're getting at there is the ability to punch, repeat.
I don't
kind of like those.
Normalized. I almost find that not as relevant, to be honest, because you can fake, I shouldn't say fake, but you can make such a big normalized number with hard hits, like crits in particular, right? Cyclocross, not so much, but crits, I find you can just, you can do normalize over your FTP pretty often if it's a hard crit because of those surges recover. So I almost feel like that's not even a metric that should be considered. I mean, it feels good. It's like good to see that, but I just don't know how worthwhile and useful that number is, to be frank.
Yeah. In this case, I feel like it is, if you are struggling to hit any of like to even hit 100% of your FTP for an hour, I would feel like, oh, maybe the problem is this athlete doesn't have an accurately set FTP. But in this case, the crits, that sort of thing, this kind of feels about right for a punchy rider to be able to do even 110 super high for their normalized power for an hour. But I've seen some, like Pete Morris is a good example of an athlete that has what they call them NP busters. And they're these normalized power values after an hour of racing because they're just so good at punch over and over that they can have wildly high normalized power figures at the end of an hour.
Yeah, I'm looking
so what this indicates to
110% of FTP is pretty, looking at some numbers, that's pretty beefy for like even a crit, actually. That's higher than I would expect. I would expect more like 105%.
Yes. If anything, looking at this almost indicates to me that maybe their FTP is a bit low, right? Like, I'm not saying it's certain, but 110% is just beastly. That's really, really gnarly to be able to do. So this athlete, I feel like what I'm getting from this is FTP probably isn't the main problem here. Like it's probably somewhere close to around right, looking at what they've put up with us or shared with us here. They go on to say, I'm thinking of changing up my coach and possibly going with TrainerRoad, but I just want to make sure I'm doing what I need to break free from my sprinter tendencies and actually become better at the long stuff. Any suggestions on what I should change? Tobin, this one's, I feel like, probably very relevant for you,
Very
an athlete that
relevant.
came from cyclocross and then went to endurance racing.
Yeah, I mean, the relevance here for me is having if you can get there with the sprint, you can use the sprint, but getting there is the hard part. And, in this sense, like, it's a little tricky because in some of the stuff, it's like there's no replacement for displacement being the volume of training that it takes to have that engine to be there at the end. Like these hard, long gravel races, sometimes it just takes a lot of doing them and just getting all those miles in your legs to just have that engine and have whatever sort of like physiological efficiencies required to just be there. But yeah, then at the same time, like, you're training 10 hours a week, which is pretty, like,
it's not small.
It's not nothing. It's like, it's to me, 10 to like 14 hours a week is what someone with a normal job, a dedicated cyclist with a normal job can do. So I feel like
it's kind of the upper limit of that. It feels like
14 is almost the upper, because 14 is like, you're probably taking 1 day off a week or maybe 2 with a normal job. So in 6 or 5 days, you're doing 14 hours of work, it's a lot. Nothing for
big
day.
Weekends, most likely.
It's probably big weekends, probably 8-hour weekends. And then the rest of it's 1.5 to 2-hour rides during the week when you can, or an hour. So yeah, I mean, in a way, I wonder, like, yeah, zone 2 is always going to make you efficient, right? Like, never discount endurance. And I would almost, sometimes I see a lot with people that they are like, okay, zone 2 ride or whatever, endurance. And something that I think people write off at those rides is like, what's your raw average for that ride? Are you really doing zone 2? Because it's easy to think you're doing zone 2 and you're actually not, right? You're below it. And something I find really helpful, and I learned this from my coach, is when you go out to do those rides, it sounds kind of crazy, but almost zone 2 intervals. So hear me out here. Maybe that means that if you have an hour or an hour and a half ride, like, if I was writing training plans for people, what I would do, I learned again from Dave, like, I would put in maybe like 15 or 20 minutes, zone 2, 2 minutes off, 10, 15 minutes, zone 2. And maybe it's different variations of zone 2. Maybe some of it's upper endurance, maybe some of it's lower endurance. And I guess I have some numbers written down here. So like, I don't know, some of these zones like are maybe that 60 to 65% being zone 2. And then some of these intervals are maybe 65 to 75% like being endurance plus. And so what I'm getting at here is when you go to do that ride, make sure you're really doing that ride. And I think having those intervals in there keeps you honest, because you're like, I have 10 minutes of zone 2 right now, undisturbed 10 minutes. And then I'm going to have 2 minutes off where I can just take a drink, and you just take your 2 minutes off and you get right back to it. And it's not like threshold where you're gassed on your 2 minutes off. It's just you take a minute to coast. And then when it's time to do the work again, you have the accountability of your Garmin or whatever telling you, go, hold this average. And I think that's a super effective way to make sure you're actually doing real endurance work instead of pseudo endurance work. Because if you're doing endurance for 3 minutes, then 2 minutes off, then 5 minutes, and this, you're not making your body really burn. And after you do a real endurance ride where you're really pushing on the pedals hard with intention the whole ride, you'll get home and you're like, I'm tired. Like, it's actually very tiring. And that's the sign of, I think, like a well done endurance ride, is that you were pedaling the whole time. You pedal on the flats, you pedal on the uphills, you pedal on the downhills where you can. And so I think potentially not hitting those endurance rides perfectly is not training your body to have some of those efficiencies in the longer events. And then also we could talk about, some tempo and sweet spot work as
Yeah.
well. But I don't
That's a
know.
great point, Tobin.
That would be
And that's
something to
actually
look at.
that's how a lot of our endurance workouts are structured. And we've added a lot of workouts, and not where it's just easy pedaling, or coasting in between, but it'll break it up like a ride into fifths.
Yeah.
So that every other fifth of however long that ride is, you'll be at like a crucial, maybe you'll be at N plus, and the rest of it you'll be at low endurance, 50% of FTP, something around there, 55%, something low. And then the rest of it you'll be at something slightly higher depending on your ability levels. TrainerRoad understands your ability levels in each zone and gives you whatever is appropriate for you at that time.
And N plus people too is like almost tempo. Almost.
Yes, it's like bleeding edge.
Yeah, because Keegan always used to say, I didn't know what N plus was. It's just endurance plus. So endurance is it's kind of a huge zone, right? If it's a 20% span of probably like 55 to like 75.
55 to 75%. Yeah.
So N plus is probably that, 70 to 75 realm right before you're jumping into tempo. Just for, I don't know, I always kind of didn't quite understand what people meant by that. But anyways. Keep going.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point, is just because you have 10 hours of zone 2, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's really productive. And we see the opposite too, Tobin, and I'm sure you've seen this too, where if you look at their time in zone at the end of that zone 2 ride, there's a significant amount of time, a double-digit percentage of time spent in zones above zone 2, where it's going to be, tempo, sweet spot, threshold, VO2 even,
Yeah.
And I think that it's really important to kind of stay within that domain. You brought up what I view as the more critical issue here is, this seems like, from what I can tell, 10 hours per week of zone 2 and then 2 interval days each week. That seems like a pretty strict, polarized 80-20 sort of format, which can be really beneficial for different athletes, and especially as your volume increases, it's just really tough to be able to do, your percentages always get skewed. As the total units of work increase, you can't proportionally increase the amount of high intensity work or you'll just die. It's too hard. So, but gravel, you pointed this out, Tobin, there's a lot of sweet spot tempo sort of stuff in gravel. It's where you actually spend the majority of your time, is that end plus up to sweet spot. That's where you spend the majority of your day with gravel.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at your training, I'm not seeing any of that. And there's the level of specificity that totally ignores your unique physiology, in this case to the anonymous question submitter, that you do need that level of specificity, I think, to do well at that longer endurance stuff, especially since it's gravel. You need some of that. Don't be afraid to introduce a bit of a pyramidal nature into your training for that. I think it's beneficial and very practical. But there's the other side of it, that it sounds like this athlete, Tobin, is just like a ball of fast twitch muscle.
That's right.
Where and there's something that happens when you do, when you ride low endurance work, it doesn't send quite as strong of a stimulus toward fiber type recomposition as if you are riding in those sort of middle-ish intensity zones where you're going to be somewhere in that end plus up to sweet spot. And what that is basically if you're just a bunch of fast twitch muscle and you continue to just lift weights, your body's going to be like, sweet, I'm optimized for the task because I can create a huge amount of force for a short period of time. I don't have to sustain load for a really long period of time, and I don't have to be too efficient, really. Instead, I can just create a huge amount of force for a short period of time. And as you do endurance work, if it's real diligent, like Tobin said, zone 2 work, as you accumulate an uninterrupted amount of time at that intensity, your body will start to get the memo that it's like, hey, we've got all this fast twitch fiber, but it's not very effective for this sort of work.
And uninterrupted is important there. Uninterrupted.
Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit? Why you say that?
I just, sorry, not to cut you off. Just
that's great. It's a super good point.
The uninterrupted is no stoplights, and this is hard because not everyone has places to go do this kind of riding. But yeah, it's out of town. There's no stop signs. There's no stoplights. There's ideally not a ton of cars where, you know, you might have to like get out of their way or whatever. It's just uninterrupted. You can put the zone on the computer and you can just kind of look at it and you can just continue to push those numbers without massive undulations. Or I mean, an ideal spot to do this is just flat roads. And you just sit there and you
or
just
the trainer.
Or the trainer is the most ideal. It's a little mind numbing. I personally really don't like riding the trainer, but if you're one of those people who has a family or maybe your kid's there and the napping or in the stroller or whatever, it is great.
Or you don't have circumstances like what you talked about, like the roads to allow it.
Or you can't do it.
I think it's super underutilized. While it may be mind numbing, there's like a lot of different things that people can do to be able to bring the entertainment they want with it. If you're riding Zone 2, you can probably watch a show and still like
enjoy it.
It's not going to be too distracting. You can do Zwift. You can do anything else.
That's a good point with Zone 2. Like if you're doing it on the trainer, it's not like doing actual threshold work on the trainer just sucks. You know, it's like you're just hard. It's so hard. I almost feel like it's almost like at altitude where you almost have to take a percentage off your...
What we see is athletes get used to it over time. Like for me these days, like there's zero difference between what I can do on the trainer and outside.
Damn, not
But
me.
it sure didn't feel like that in the beginning, man. You know, but as I got used to it and everything else, it changes it. But yeah, to your point, and the physiological reason though behind what you're talking about is when you give your body a break to reset, you reset that stimulus sending message. Like you interrupt the message. And when that's interrupted, now, there's probably somebody from a physiological standpoint that could totally break down what I'm saying and say that it's not correct. I'm speaking more from a metaphorical perspective here. But effectively, what you're trying to do is if the message is uninterrupted, it's going to send a stronger signal to your body that specific adaptation needs to happen. In other words, my body needs to get better at being under muscular strain and load, a moderate level of it, but continually for a really long time.
Yeah.
And when you do that, that's when your body starts to transform all of those slow twitch fibers to more efficient fibers, type 2Bs, or even you're getting down to like the slow twitch side of things. You can change your muscle makeup. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to build muscle forever after that. Your body probably, in this case to this athlete, has like a natural tendency and a hard-coded like firmware where it's like, I want to build fast twitch.
Yeah.
And your training is going to go against that and it's going to make it happen. But you can either do that with long, extended periods of Zone 2, or if you shorten up those periods with tempo and sweet spot work, you can send that signal very strong, but then not suffer the effects of getting into anaerobic sort of work contribution with your threshold and VO2 or anything else. It's a great way to do that. So I view this, and I think that you probably need a bit more of a pyramidal approach to send that stimulus. And I don't know about you, Tobin, but when you can ride at when you can throw together like 2 and 3 15 to 20 minute sweet spot efforts after each other with like minimal rest in between, man, you feel bulletproof on the bike. Like you may not be able to, that doesn't mean that you'll be able to punch and respond nonstop. That's a specific type of training that you need too. But man, you're hard to kill. Right? Yeah. It just makes you really, really tough to drop.
Yeah, it makes you really tough to drop. And then once you have that develop, as long as you know maybe, I mean, Anonymous probably won't have this issue because he's got the punch. But once you have those intervals and you've done that work and you know that you can continually do that work and you can change the way you respond to attacks in races, man, it just, again, it makes you so hard to kill because like if you just know you can settle in at X and just be there within plus or minus 5% and you see someone attack, you're like, okay, I'm going to slowly ramp this up, but I know I can just hold here and I'll bring them back. And you start to realize like, man, you can just, I know it's dumb. It's just like a diesel, you're just warmed up and you can just chug all day with these little variations and man, it just makes you so strong. That's what you need in gravel is you need that because that pays more dividends than having that explosivity because we're not racing crits or cyclocross, we're doing that chugging all day.
Yes.
Especially in the Midwest.
Oh, yeah. Right? Where the gravel is constantly loose, raising the floor for everything. And then on top of that, it's just rolling hills or flat,
Yeah.
This is, I think, misunderstood a lot of the time. People think that middle intensity domain is not very practical. I think it's very race specific. And then on top of that, a lot of unique adaptations come from it, and it's really valuable to have. Of course, you want to make sure that you're fueling your work.
Big fuel for
if
these.
you're doing, yeah, you drain so many calories so quick. It's like your caloric burn for a VO2 max workout, even though you may feel like you did a lot of hard work with the VO2 max workout, compared to something that's going to be like a high tempo or sweet spot workout, you burn so many more calories with that high tempo sweet spot stuff. And then a long zone 2 day where you're riding at between 65 to 75%, you burn a huge amount of calories that way too when you're never dropping out of the zone.
And I think
so you have to fuel it.
Yeah, fueling it too. And I mean, you're teaching your body the efficiencies, your muscles the efficiencies, but I think you're also teaching your body how to use the fuel you're giving it if you're doing these things in conjunction with one another, which is how you should be doing it. If you're hitting these high carb marks and you can stomach it, again, you don't crack. You don't have these catastrophic, I could barely pedal my way to the finish. You just are super bulletproof as long as you're doing everything correctly in training and fueling properly in the race. Obviously, you can't control the pace of the race, but you can control the pace of your training, and you can always control your nutrition.
And for this athlete, I don't think they have to worry about losing their punch or their snap. You'll still want to train that sort of stuff when it's relevant, but you probably have so much natural ability toward that in terms, again, your firmware is hard-coded in that regard, that you're probably not going to lose that. I know a lot of cyclists that have come from weightlifting or bodybuilding background or some other background like that where they're really, really muscly and really strong. And, they take this approach of trying to train to get rid of that weakness and transform it into something that is no longer a weakness and perhaps even a strength. But they always know they can rely on the strength of the sprint. It's always there. It doesn't go away. They have that ability. So I don't think you have to worry about just you're not going to go from being somebody that looks like a Arnold Schwarzenegger to somebody that looks like a World Tour cyclist from one day to the next. Probably don't have to worry about that. You'll still have the punch.
And yeah, you're always and if you're that good, you're probably miles ahead of anyone else. So, even if you lose 5%, which you're probably not, you're still going to be better than everyone else. If you're, the same thing I'm envisioning this guy is just like a Cam Jones type rider, just
yes.
Power. So
immense power.
Is this Cam Jones? Who is this?
Yeah, it was anonymous. Yeah, good point. Cam, drop me a line. You could have just sent me a DM.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, probably Cam Jones. For those who don't know, Cam Jones, New Zealander, who's over here racing in the U.S. Go follow him and support him too. He and Matt, and they're awesome athletes that are really kind of upsetting the apple cart here. So doing some cool stuff. Okay. Next one is from somebody in our YouTube comments from last week's podcast, actually. And actually, before we get into that, if you're listening to this podcast, you appreciate it, can you please give the video a thumbs up? That'd be amazing, because then that will make people realize, or YouTube realize, that it should be shared to more people. And if you watch it from beginning all the way through the end, you can just even let it sit there and play on mute if you want. That, I think, sends the strongest signal. So that would be great. Review the podcast, share it with your friends. We appreciate it. This question says, question for another podcast. I'm a 42-year-old cycling for a few years, decided to give structured training and racing a try this year. My plan is to do a few cross-country races over the spring and summer and a few cyclocross races in the fall. My first cross-country race was a disaster. Now, there are many reasons I could point to. Missed training due to back spasms, went out too hard, inexperienced pacing, a big crash, etc. But one thing that really struck me was how unprepared and as a result, slow, I felt on my mountain bike and technical sections. I spent all of my time on the trainer and road bike for training sessions and just didn't spend enough time on my mountain bike. I'm an experienced mountain biker and I'm a decent technical rider, but I felt really out of my depth in my first race. I realized I need to spend more time actually mountain biking. Big realization, I know. I live in Pennsylvania, and my local loops are all rocky, rooty, and punchy. No long fire road climbs or flowing descents. There's no opportunity for getting out on an endurance ride or keeping the heart rate down. Any proper mountain bike ride is going to have a fair bit of intensity. So here's my question. Given a lack of training time and recovery, I have a family, job, your 40s. If I am to substitute one of my hard sessions here and there for a mountain bike ride, which is the best proxy? In other words, which ones should I replace? for VO2, threshold, or anaerobic? Any tips on doing so? I appreciate the time and really enjoy TrainerRoad. Thanks. So the question is, Tobin, in this situation where they don't have the sort of terrain that lends themselves to the sort of training we were talking about before, where it's kind of like an outdoor trainer.
Yeah.
Yep. Which sessions they want to add in more mountain biking. So which training days should they replace? VO2, threshold, or anaerobic? This is, I think, I think I might have like an answer that doesn't fit into those three.
That's
myself.
It's kind of a hard question because I totally understand the feeling. You can't do endurance on the mountain bike because of your terrain. And I mean, let's be honest, even if you were to do endurance, the terrain that you would do endurance on is not going to make you a better technical rider anyways, because technical riding requires micro punch, half pedal strokes, jumping, you load your legs sometimes by just doing like the squat on the seat, even like the hover over certain terrain when you're trying to be light. So man, I don't know. I'm curious to think what you would think, what session to replace, because I do think when you have your endurance days, you can't do those on the mountain bike. That's just how it's going to be. And your mountain bike days, you obviously need more time on your mountain bike because you're seeing a lack of skill. Yeah, man, I don't know what day to replace with that, to be honest, because I do understand the question and how it's hard, it's punchy and whatnot. So, well, I mean, what would you do?
This is very regionally specific. So in this case, in Pennsylvania, I have to take your word for it. I've never ridden there. I have in my mind just like endless wet, slick roots and rocks.
Me too.
That gives me nightmares. But if you are going to replace one or look for a replacement, it's anaerobic. Like, I assume you mentioned that you don't have any long climbs. So your ability to punch and like put out high torque and do all that sort of stuff for short periods of time, I'd say that's what I would replace. But something key to understand here is that most anaerobic workouts do not have you doing anaerobic efforts in close succession. A lot of the time, it's more about having things somewhat spaced out, or it's the sort of anaerobic work where that's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
So if it's higher intensity in the anaerobic spectrum, then you are going to want to have more time in between, because the goal with anaerobic workouts that are way up high is to reach the highest number you can for that specified time, whether it's as short as 10 seconds or as long as 30 seconds or whatever it might be. And those are usually going to have a lot of rest in between them. Whereas, those sort of workouts, I think, are better replaced. Like, that would be a bit better to do on these sort of trails. But when you get into like the 30-30 sort of stuff, that's not just VO2 max, but it's anaerobic ones where you're more likely to see like 15 on, 15 off, that sort of thing. If you have any sort of close succession set, don't try to do that out on the trails. That's going for a very specific outcome where it's like, I want you to accumulate a specific amount of time and then control your rest with a lot of precision so that you aren't spending enough or too much time in between those to be able to recover your anaerobic stores. And instead, we want to just like drain that pot completely empty. So I say anaerobic, but it would be the anaerobic sort of side when it can be fully like spaced out. But in reality, here's what I really want to say with this one. I think you can actually replace it with endurance work better than you might think. If you're listening to this and you are in the Mountain West and out to the West Coast, then this definitely applies to you. I see a lot of mountain bikers go out on endurance days, and what they do is they approach the terrain and they quit thinking about their zone and they just think about getting up the terrain. And as a result, they surge when they don't need to surge. Like, you can actually go up stuff slow. And in many cases, it actually helps you work on your technique. And there's a lot of situations where if you have like a 32-tooth chainring or a 34 or a 30-tooth chainring, you can get up a lot of stuff at low power. Like, and you don't have to be just going out and surging. Now, East Coast is different with the rocks and the roots. That does make it tough, but it might actually be really beneficial for you to try to ride that terrain at endurance pace. What it's going to do is force you to really like pay attention to your mechanics, take it slower, break it down into pieces, not rely on momentum as much, which is totally what I do in the East Coast stuff because I suck. I should spend more time breaking it down, paying attention to those mechanics of what I'm doing. And if you do that, you can ride at that zone. Just last night, I had an endurance ride, and I intentionally did it on trails. It was in the snow. It was miserably cold. It was windy, but I wanted to do this to test this before I was actually going to say this on the podcast. It's something I felt like I do all the time, but I wanted to actually look at it and practice. I have a 38 tooth chainring on my mountain bike because that's where I'm doing a lot of my training right now. And these were steep trails, and they had a lot of different variation in them. I rode up them. I just took my time. And I'll put up the power profile so people can see right now. It's not perfect, don't get me wrong. And you'll see the descents in there, where on the descent, I'm not pedaling, that sort of a thing. These are bigger, longer descents. But you can actually ride at endurance more than you think is the principle I want to get to. You don't just have to jam and sprint up every single thing. And as a result, maybe you can replace a certain amount of this on a less technical loop there in Pennsylvania. So that's my 2 cents.
That's a good point about maybe just slowing down, especially the small enough chainring. A 38 is not ideal for this because it's a huge gear, but you do have a lot of torque with a small ring, and you do have a ton of grip, assuming you probably have 2.4s on, seeing as the terrain you're talking about.
When you're in the Mountain West in particular, you get like a lot of stuff where you can, it's not as steep and punchy and technical for us. Now, if you're in Moab, that's a different story. But just the same, I think that's, I don't know, that would be my suggestion there. The other side of it, though, that I feel like is the most practical is, okay, if you're training 3 days a week, add a 4th day if you're able to. And if not, if you're training 4 days a week or 5 days a week, take away 1 day.
Yeah.
And make that your day where you just go out and mountain bike.
Yeah, and never discount a day of skill work. We get so hung up, especially nowadays, with numbers and data and hitting intervals. It's just like, just go do some skill work. Just go do a fun ride and just ride the terrain. If you got to punch it. If you got to chill. Make it a skill day and have fun with it and play with your setup and your suspension and your tires and take notes and be diligent. Because the thing with having good skills is it makes separations in races for free. It costs you nothing energy-wise. And if you're good with skills, I mean, we get to use this very seldom in gravel, but with mountain bikes particular, like if you have these technical abilities, you can like sometimes just glide through something just based on upper body movement, and then someone else can be unclipping and punching, like just flailing through it and wasting so much energy, and maybe you gapped them by like 5-10 seconds just on one bit. So in that regard, I never discount having sharp skills. It's always going to be something that's worth investing in.
Yeah, great point, especially coming from somebody that has raced cyclocross for so many years. It's just like so crucial for maintenance of momentum and everything else that you guys do.
And it's hard to learn. You got to put a lot of time into it to get better at doing it. It's probably frustrating how hard it is to learn. But, consistency here is the important part. And seeing the same thing, if you do it consistent, maybe you do the same loop, you're like, oh, I put a foot down in that section or whatever, but this time I nailed it. And then I nailed that next bit and like, oh, I just literally nailed the whole loop because, I've seen it and I know it was coming and I was in the right gear. And although that might feel like cheating because you can anticipate the loop that you've done because it's your loop, it's still making you better. And when you see something like that on the racetrack, knowing what gear to be in, what body position, maybe your dropper's already down, your suspension's open or in pedal mode, or you have flight attendant and it does it for you.
And it's all magic.
It's all magic. That's, don't discount that is my 2 cents.
Well said, Tobin. Last question from Frustrated Dad. I want to start out by saying I appreciate all the content you provide. It's given me so much information I would never have gotten and has made me a faster cyclist. With that said, here comes the but. Says, yep, here it comes. Anytime I find myself consuming cycling content and hearing about these athletes above 4 watts per kilogram complaining about how they can't get to 5.9 watts per kilogram, my blood absolutely boils. I've been doing the sport for over 25 years, and as a 32-year-old, my peak was 3.8 watts per kilogram. Then I got a real job, had kids, and now at 45, I fight with everything I have to reach 3.5 watts per kilogram every year. When I hear about athletes in their 50s above 4 watts per kilogram with jobs, families, etc., I begin to spiral and think that everybody must be doping or something. I know I'm not a pro athlete with superior genetics and all the time in the world to train, but it's super discouraging to think I might never reach what others consider their off-season fitness. Can I get some consolation here? Anybody else feel like they are the only ones that aren't fast? So before Tobin and I answer this, jump into the comments and let us know if this resonates with you. I'm sure it does. There's a lot to unpack with this one, Tobin.
No, you're not the only one who doesn't feel fast.
Yeah. Can I kind of want to address the whole point of I know I'm not a pro athlete with superior genetics and all the time in the world to train. I mean, being intimately familiar with the lives of a lot of pro cyclists, and I don't know Tade, I don't know Matthew, I don't know them. Pro cyclists don't have all the time in the world to train. Like Tobin, in your situation, you carry a lot of different responsibilities. You don't just get up and the only thing that you do is just ride your bike and that's it. You have a lot of other things that you carry.
Yeah, I do. And I mean, something I think with people that have, real jobs, other jobs, responsibilities, aren't professional cyclists, is how much just other stuff you have going on with your day. One thing pros get is we don't just get the training, we also we get the recovery too. And we get a leisurely morning to go to the garage and pump up the bike tires and put the computer on, then come inside, then mix the bottles and clean your glasses and do all this other stuff that you're probably a little more time crunched doing.
Yeah. These athletes, I think there's a lot of, I've felt this similarly before, where I feel like, how is everybody else so fast? And I think that a super important thing to realize is that we can't compare ourselves to other people because we have entirely different circumstances.
There you go. Well said.
You mentioned it's, I know I'm not a pro athlete with superior genetics and all the time in the world to train, but it's super discouraging to think of all these other people being so fast all the time. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what somebody else does and where somebody else is at. And I know this is probably not the answer you wanted me to give you. You probably wanted me to tell you, yeah, I think they're doping too, man. They're all doping. And as a result, you're the only honest one. You keep working hard and screw all of them. But the reality is that's not the reality. Everybody just has different circumstances. None of it operates on the premise of fairness either.
Yeah.
None of it does. And I'm sure you felt this, Tobin.
Totally.
You look around in the group and you're just why can't, when you were racing cyclocross as a kid over in Europe, you're why can't I be like Wout? And then as you've raced gravel and everything else, you're right there with Keegan and you've probably got to think many times man, why can't I have some of that?
Yeah. And it comes down to especially that too, where I'm I could recover better. I could put more time into just doing the bike thing. But I would overall in my life not necessarily be as happy if I wasn't running out in the garage and working on a motorcycle or a car or a project or something, because it's just something that I also like doing. I really love riding my bike, but I'm not just doing that. And I mean, especially with someone with a day job and a family and just normal life things, is if comparing yourself to other people it's so easy to do, especially competing. You're literally comparing yourselves to other people when you're competing. But I don't know, you just do the best you can and just being honest with what kind of is important to you. Some of these, maybe older guys are I always just get the vision of this masters racer who's all in and trains like a pro to the expense of oh, you didn't go to your kids thing, or you didn't do this or didn't do that. You have to be, there's so much responsibility. It sounds like there's a lot of responsibility in your life beyond just bikes. And I think it's totally healthy to not be selfish in your own pursuit of cycling and have a perspective of where you're at with that. And that's just how it is. I mean, you can only do as much as you can do with all of those factors, I guess is what I'm getting at. And another thing with consuming media is who are these people putting media out there? Let's really just take a step back, and I'm going to hurt some feelings here, but you don't see the top tier guys doing it ever, right? Keegan's not putting media out there and talking about his numbers. You don't see Matt Beers doing that. You don't really, Alexi does stuff, but he's not doing that part of it. You see the good professional bike racers that aren't top tier. They're good though. And of course they want more. And of course they're talking about their numbers. You're never looking at like the dad channel talking about 3.5 watts per kilo.
The dad channel.
But
Yeah.
you kind of get where I'm going with this is like,
Yes.
if you're the people that put this media out there are those guys that are always striving for more because they haven't won the big races because they're just not that kind of caliber of athlete, frankly. Like the top dogs are never like talking about their 6 whatever watts per kilo because that's enough to win them races. It's the guys that are below that talking about what I'm doing and what I need to be doing. So of course they're always striving for more. Yeah.
I think that also goes for people that ask questions about their training and submit, and they're, these people are like curious and trying to solve these problems. And as a result, they're probably like dedicating more of their life to their training, and they're going to be the ones more likely to ask those sort of questions. When we look at our TrainerRoad database, if you are, in this case, at 45 years old, in this case, frustrated dad, at 45 years old, and you're mentioning the fact that you're still sitting right around 3 to 3.5 watts per kilogram.
Respectable.
You're at the pointy end. You're actually at the pointy end. But the thing is, we don't see the rest of the distribution of people. What we usually hear from is that upper tier midsection, and then it skews our perspective. We don't hear from the very top. We just hear of those numbers at times.
Yeah.
But we hear that upper tier midsection, like you're talking about, Tobin. And whether that's from people asking questions on the podcast, people talking in forums, on the TrainerRoad forum, or it's videos or something else that you're consuming, you'll hear a lot. That's like a noisy section because they're trying to solve problems. But you are actually, by our data, I would assume that you're somewhere within the top 5 or 10%. You can actually figure that out. If you go and sign up for TrainerRoad, it'll analyze your entire training history and it'll give you a power profile and show you how you rank against every other TrainerRoad athlete in the world, which this is probably the biggest database of, and this is a skewed perspective too. This isn't everybody that rides bikes. These are people that want to train to accomplish something, whether it's just like be fit and raise their FTP or a specific race. But still, it's probably the biggest sound, clean database that you can see. And you'll see that even in that group, which is pretty selective, you're in the upper tier at that age group. So I think that's honestly part of why we built that feature, is to help athletes get the sort of perspective to be like, oh, all right, I'm not like, because we hear from a lot of athletes that always mention the fact that like, I'm super slow. I just can't get past 3.5 watts per kilogram. We're like, hey, let's switch that perspective. You're doing actually really well. Like that's a strong position to be in.
Not a shot at Dylan. But like you said, that's a noisy section of the thing. And they're these very analytical racers that put the things out there, and it's easy to consume because they have such following. These videos pop up and you see these things talked about because they're open about it. So of course you see that, and it's hard to not compare to these things you see, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I assume that it's even harder for you as a professional because it matters. Like for you, it's like that is your job, is like, and like you said, literally comparing yourself against others in races, and I kind of, when you mentioned that, I wanted to add like my perspective on racing. I'm extremely competitive by nature. That's like, I've grown up always competing in sports and in racing in particular. And over the years, I've had to understand the fact that like my performance on the day doesn't define who I was, or my performance relative to other people certainly does not define who I am as an athlete. It's just about how I executed with what I had that day, and I have to compare against that. And it's like, all right, what potential did I have, and what did I do with it that day? And that's what really matters. If you get into cycling and your context is always you versus everybody else and seeing how that works, I know sounds like, well, yeah, that's what it is. If you do that, and if your name isn't Tade, Matthew, Keegan, or Sophia, it's going to be really, really hard for you. And it's going to be pretty miserable, and it's going to drag a lot away. You have to change your perspective and understand the fact that you're just competing with your own ability to be able to execute on the day with what you have. And that's like what you just have to go for.
I think it takes a lot of maturity to I mean, we're talking to like a dad here or whatever. So you're not an immature individual, I'm assuming, but it takes a lot of maturity within your venture of cycling to be able to look at what you have on the day and what you accomplished on the day and feel good about that. Cause it is hard. It's really hard
Yes.
because of course you're comparing yourself, but sometimes, like you said, you just have to look at what I did, where I started, what I had in my toolbox that day, and be like, you know what, like, it's not a top 5 or whatever, but like, I actually did these things really well. So I'm going to go away from the day feeling good about it. And, that's all you can do. And it's hard, and it can be hard to do that, but I don't know, you try to give yourself a break here and there and enable yourself to do that, because it's not always big victories, it's little things here and there. And having accountability, like, I didn't do this well. I can do that better next time. And then next time, maybe you do that better. You're like, okay, that is a step in the right direction, always, no matter what, because it is hard. It's always going to be hard to change your, FTP. Like, it's just how it is. Like, at a certain point, you just kind of feel like stuck there, and that's totally normal. Like, I don't feel like my FTP has changed much for a long time, and I think about it all the time too. I'm like, well, what, clearly I would be doing better if it was higher, but like, I'm already like training as hard as I can. Well, then you're like, wow, what do you do? Do I gotta get skinnier? Like, but then am I going to be unhappy? And you're just like, all this, you can just spiral with all this stuff. It's like, you have what you have and do what you can do with what you got.
Yeah, really well said, Tobin.
Run what you brung.
Run what you brung. Wout is being a great example of this right now. I've heard even some pundits, kind of saying like, why isn't he more upset about this? Like, why isn't he winning? Like, what's going on?
Wout is class, absolute class right now, especially when he lost to Nielsen. Like, so much respect.
Immense respect. I think the world of that guy. I don't know Wout. I just think the world of he's amazing. Like huge fan. And I'm a really big fan of how he's approaching and like externalizing, and because he is, if you ask Wout if he's frustrated, absolutely he's frustrated. Like that he isn't winning more often this year. But it's really cool to see how he manages it. And he is very transparent in his interviews where he's like, yep, I wasn't best today, but I did these things really well. And he then comes up with different things. Like when he lost to Nielsen, he was like, I wanted this win for myself, and it was my ego driving that. And I compromised the outcome that we could have had with the team. Like, what a great example of him taking ownership, like you said.
So good. Yeah, literally it was like, I've been under so much critique and I just needed this for me. And you're like, wow. I mean, of course you did. Anyone would have done the same thing. Of course you did that. Like, it was the complete wrong decision, but it's such a human thing to have wanted to do. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, Wout is looking around at other people, to this frustrated dad, and kind of feeling a similar thing to you, where it's kind of like, why aren't I winning? Like, why aren't I doing this? Why aren't, But he's, I think, modeling how to approach it. You just compare, you look at what you did on the day and you analyze that. And that's like what you look at. So don't compare yourself in that regard. I don't find it helpful, especially for all of us average athletes that are listening to this. Instead, when you hear somebody writing in at 3 point whatever, or 4 point whatever, or 5 point whatever for their watt kg, instead of thinking, man, that's so much faster than me, why can't I be like that? View it all relative. Try to pull out the principles that they're getting from that question being answered. When you hear somebody, talking on whatever social media you're engaging about how they came from this to this, instead of thinking that that's what I would need to do in order to reach 5 watts per kilo, just look at the principles and think, okay, if I apply those, maybe that can help, but never set any sort of benchmark that's a comparison for other people in that regard. I think that's a healthy way to approach it. I am not a sports psychologist. I have no clue. If you are a sports psychologist, tell me what I messed up there. It'd be great to have you on the podcast. Jump in the YouTube comments if you're not a sports psychologist, but you fancy yourself one, and let us know what we messed up too. Tobin, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Of course. Always happy to do it.
Next race is Unbound for you?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and then will you be doing Lost and Found this year as well?
Yeah, I'll be a Lost and Found. So hit Unbound and then try to chill pretty hard it's 2 weeks after. So it's like pretty not optimal, but it's not terrible either. So yeah.
Yeah. I want to do that race again this year too. I don't know if my schedule will allow it, but I want to do that race again.
You got to do it. More people should do it. I helped make the course this year. We went out in November on the dirt bikes and made it, and it's going to be a cool course. So yeah, can't say enough good things about it.
Well, support the races like we talk about here, Lost and Found, that Tobin's involved in. Support Tobin's sponsors too. Santa Cruz Bikes, they make incredible gravel bikes and mountain bikes and e-bikes and everything else that you can do. Velocio for their apparel, really good stuff there. Go follow Tobin's social channels and you can see all the different things that he uses, and then you can support their sponsors. That sends a good, strong signal that they can continue to support these athletes and they should increase that support. That's how it all works. If you appreciated Tobin's participation, it's probably the best way to do it. Go give him a follow on social media. If you want your questions answered, leave them down in the YouTube comments. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, go to TrainerRoad.com and sign up. It is the #1 rated cycling training app in the whole App Store for a reason, because it works. So go sign up. It'll make you faster. It uses AI to do that. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.